The early evening air, tinged with the promise of a perfect night, seemed to vibrate around Sophia as she carefully adjusted the hem of her emerald green evening gown. The fabric, a luxurious silk that shimmered with a life of its own, cascaded over her skin like a gentle waterfall, each fold a testament to the exquisite design. She caught her reflection in the antique mirror, a relic from a bygone era, its ornate frame a silent witness to countless similar preparations. Sophia's auburn hair, a vibrant halo around her face, was meticulously pinned into an elegant updo, each strand carefully placed. A touch of crimson lipstick, applied with a practiced hand, highlighted the full curve of her lips, a subtle statement of confidence and allure. Tonight, she thought, was more than just a company event. It was the annual fundraising gala, an event she'd been anticipating for months, a culmination of hard work, ambition, and a desire to shine. The Grand Riviera Hotel, an architectural marvel that stood as a testament to the city's gilded past, was the perfect stage. The prospect of being among her peers, clients, and industry luminaries, all gathered under the same glittering chandeliers, filled her with a thrilling sense of anticipation. More than anything, she craved the recognition, the unspoken approval that would solidify her place among the elite. But beneath the surface, a more personal motivation churned. She desperately wanted to reignite the spark in her marriage, to see a return of the admiring gaze in her husband's eyes. She believed, with a hope that bordered on desperation, that tonight would be different, a chance for Ethan and her to reconnect under the city's dazzling skyline. But the hope flickered, a fragile candle in a gathering storm. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, his shoulders hunched as if he were carrying the weight of the world. He meticulously adjusted his cufflinks, the simple act to study in quiet frustration. His tailored navy suit, an impeccable garment crafted by the most revered hands, hung on him like armor, its formal structure seeming to encase a restless soul. Sophia had noticed his disengagement over the past few weeks. Their once lively conversations had dwindled to terse exchanges, his responses short, sharp stabs that pierced her fragile hopes. He no longer looked at her with the same spark, the same admiration that had once lit his eyes. Yet, Sophia pushed down the doubt, clinging to the belief that this night, this grand occasion, would somehow change everything. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice a blend of excitement and underlying apprehension. The question hung in the air, a fragile plea for connection. She watched him, studying his posture, the minute details of his expression, searching for any hint of the man she once knew. Ethan looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers briefly before shifting away, his gaze seemingly drawn to some unseen point in the distance. "Yeah," he replied, his voice flat and devoid of any real emotion. "Let's just get this over with." His response, terse and dismissive, sent a chill through Sophia, a reminder of the growing chasm that had opened between them. Sophia's smile, carefully crafted, faltered for a split second, her usual warmth replaced by a subtle flicker of unease. But she masked it quickly, her practiced ease returning with a determined force. "It'll be fun," she said, her voice laced with a forced cheerfulness, a desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Trust me." It was a mantra, a shield she used to deflect the doubt that gnawed at her. As they drove toward the hotel, a tense silence settled between them, the opulent interior of the car a stark contrast to the emotional distance growing wider with each passing mile. Sophia glanced at Ethan, her gaze lingering on the rigid set of his jaw, the tightness around his mouth, a physical manifestation of his internal turmoil. She wondered what was going on in his head, what dark thoughts were clouding his mind. She had tried, with all her heart, to understand, to bridge the gap, but her efforts seemed to be met with an unyielding wall of indifference. The city lights, a glittering spectacle outside their windows, offered no comfort, casting long shadows that seemed to mirror the darkness within their marriage. The Grand Riviera Hotel loomed before them, a beacon of elegance and grandeur against the night sky. Stepping into the sprawling ballroom was like stepping into a different world, a realm of crystal chandeliers, shimmering gowns, and hushed conversations. The room was filled with a sea of elegantly dressed guests, each one a carefully constructed persona, a facade of success and composure. Sophia greeted her colleagues with practiced grace, her smile never faltering, her movements fluid and confident. She introduced Ethan with pride, a subtle, almost desperate attempt to showcase a united front, despite his distant demeanor. Her hand brushed his arm as she introduced him to several clients, a brief, almost hesitant touch, as if she were seeking some form of reassurance. But his responses were perfunctory, his focus seemingly elsewhere, a tangible reminder of his emotional absence. She felt like a performer on a stage, her every move scrutinized, her every word carefully chosen, while Ethan, her partner in this grand charade, seemed to be playing a role in a different drama altogether. The early hours of the evening were a blur of polite conversations, forced smiles, and a desperate yearning for genuine connection. Sophia found herself drawn into discussions with clients, her expertise and charisma shining through, and with coworkers, each conversation a reminder of the respect and recognition she had earned. Among them was Adrian, a charming and charismatic consultant who had recently joined her team. His presence was a refreshing contrast to the gloom that surrounded her marriage. Adrian had an effortless way of making people feel at ease, his quick wit and easy smile lighting up the room, drawing people in like moths to a flame. Sophia enjoyed their banter, their easy give and take, the lightness and humor that seemed to flow effortlessly between them, a welcome escape from the tense silences that had become the norm at home. "You're quite the star tonight," Adrian said, his eyes sparkling with genuine admiration as they stood by the bar, the gentle clinking of glasses filling the air around them. "I've been hearing your name all evening. Everyone's impressed with your work on the Hudson Project." His words were a balm to her weary soul, a validation of her efforts and talent, a stark contrast to Ethan's silence and lack of support. Sophia laughed, a warm blush creeping up her neck, a blush that was not from embarrassment, but from genuine pleasure. "Oh, stop," she said, her voice light and playful, a stark contrast to the strained tone she had been using with Ethan. It was a team effort. She felt a sense of lightness she hadn't experienced in months, a sense of being truly seen and appreciated, something she had been longing for. Adrian raised an eyebrow, his smile widening, a hint of flirtation playing around his lips. "Don't be modest. You led that team and you know it." The words, spoken with a disarming sincerity, sent a small thrill through her, a spark of excitement she hadn't felt in a long time. Their conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by shared laughter and subtle glances. Sophia felt a warmth spreading through her, a sense of being alive and engaged. She wasn't blind to the way Adrian's eyes lingered on her, the slightly flirtatious edge to his tone, the subtle gestures that spoke of unspoken admiration. Part of her, a small voice of caution, knew she should step away, create distance, protect herself and her marriage. But another part, the part that felt neglected, unappreciated, and unseen, reveled in the attention, savoring each moment as if it were a forbidden treat. Across the room, Ethan watched from a distance, his jaw set tight, his eyes fixed on the interaction between Sophia and Adrian with a growing sense of unease and resentment. He didn't understand the easy laughter, the comfortable banter, the shared smiles. He felt a pang of something that felt like loss and anger. A part of him knew he was partly responsible for the chasm between him and Sophia, but his ego wouldn't let him acknowledge that, instead, he chose to blame her. Sophia, her focus solely on Adrian, didn't notice his burning stare, the way his hand tightened around his glass, the subtle twitch of his jaw, all signs of his barely contained rage. She was too engrossed in the moment, in the way Adrian made her feel, visible, valued, alive. As the evening progressed, the music shifted, the tempo slowing to a more intimate rhythm, casting the ballroom in a soft, almost romantic glow. Couples began to sway on the dance floor, their bodies moving in sync, their faces illuminated by the gentle light. Adrian, sensing the shift in atmosphere, extended a hand towards Sophia, his eyes holding a subtle invitation. "Care for a dance?" he asked, his voice smooth and confident. Sophia hesitated, her eyes darting instinctively to where Ethan stood by the edge of the room. He was engaged in conversation with one of her co-workers, but his body language suggested a lack of interest, his gaze avoiding her. A flicker of defiance sparked within her, a desire to break free from the constraints of her stagnant marriage. It was a small rebellion, a silent act of defiance against the man who had seemed so distant. The invitation was a temptation, a siren call in the darkness. With a surge of adrenaline, she accepted Adrian's hand, her heart pounding in her chest, a mix of excitement and trepidation coursing through her veins. The dance floor was a world of its own, a space where time seemed to slow down and reality faded into the background. Couples swayed in time with the music, their bodies moving as one, their eyes locking in silent communication. Adrian's hand rested lightly on Sophia's waist, his touch respectful yet undeniably warm, a subtle hint of desire that sent a thrill through her. Their bodies moved in sync, their steps matching the rhythm of the music, their conversation dipping into more personal territory. Adrian shared stories of his travels, his ambitions, and the challenges he'd faced in his career, his words painting a vivid picture of a life filled with adventure and passion. Sophia found herself opening up in return, sharing anecdotes and stories she'd long since stopped telling Ethan, memories of her childhood, dreams of the future, secrets she had kept locked away for years. "You're incredible, you know that?" Adrian said softly, his gaze locking with hers, his eyes reflecting the candlelight, making them seem deeper and more intense. "I'm lucky to know you." The sincerity in his voice, the unspoken admiration in his eyes, caught her off guard, stirring something deep within her, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. It was a forbidden pleasure, a dangerous game she was playing, but in that moment, she didn't care. Her mind raced, a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, the voice of reason battling against the desires that were pushing her forward. The warmth of his hand on her waist, the intensity of his gaze, the admiration in his words, they all combined to create a magnetic force, drawing her closer, tempting her to cross a line she knew she shouldn't. But before she could respond, before she could allow herself to succumb completely to the seductive pull of the moment, a shadow loomed over them, a stark reminder of the world she had tried to escape. Ethan's voice cut through the music like a sharp blade, a harsh interruption that shattered the fragile spell of the dance. "Mind if I cut in?" he said, his tone laced with a barely contained anger, his words dripping with sarcasm. Sophia and Adrian turned to find him standing just a step away, his face contorted in a mask of rage, his eyes burning with jealousy and betrayal. His posture was stiff, his muscles tense, his entire being radiating an aura of barely suppressed fury. Adrian's hand dropped from Sophia's waist as he stepped back, his confident demeanor faltering under Ethan's glare. He had been in similar situations before, he knew what was happening. He'd had this same conversation with other men. He had to leave before things got ugly. "Of course," Adrian said smoothly, though there was an unmistakable edge of discomfort in his tone, his forced smile a thin veneer over his unease. He nodded politely to Sophia, his eyes conveying a subtle apology, before retreating into the crowd, disappearing into the sea of faces, leaving Sophia alone to face Ethan's wrath. "What the hell are you doing?" Ethan hissed, his words sharp and biting as he took Sophia's arm, his grip firm but not painful, a possessive gesture that sent a shiver down her spine. He pulled her away from the dance floor, toward the edge of the room, his eyes narrowed, a warning signal that she couldn't ignore. "Dancing," Sophia replied, her voice defensive, her tone mirroring the hostility in his. "It's a party, Ethan. People dance." She crossed her arms over her chest, her chin lifted slightly in defiance, her anger beginning to rise to match his. She wasn't going to allow herself to be treated like a child. Ethan's eyes burned into hers, his gaze intense and accusing. "Not like that," he said, his voice low and menacing. "Not with him." He was trying to control his rage, to keep his voice down, to avoid a public scene, but the anger was boiling beneath the surface, threatening to erupt at any moment. The argument that followed was quiet but fierce, a battle of words fought in hushed tones, the intensity of their emotions cutting through the facade of the evening, like shards of glass piercing through fragile skin. Sophia accused Ethan of neglecting her, of treating her as an afterthought, a shadow in his life, someone he barely acknowledged anymore. She poured out all the pent-up frustration and resentment she had been carrying for months, her voice trembling with hurt and anger. She spoke of their dwindling conversations, his lack of attention, the emptiness she felt when they were together, the growing chasm that separated their hearts. She had tried to tell him, to communicate her feelings, but he had never listened, always dismissing her concerns, telling her that she was being too dramatic. Ethan countered with accusations of betrayal, of crossing boundaries she should have known better than to test. He accused her of flirting, of seeking validation from another man, of disrespecting their marriage, her vows, and him. He had seen the way Adrian looked at her, the way she had laughed, the easy intimacy between them. It felt like a knife to his heart, a betrayal he couldn't comprehend. He had worked hard to get to where he was, to provide for her, to build a life with her. Why wasn't that enough? He felt cheated, robbed of his place in her life. Both felt justified, both had valid points, but neither could see the other's pain clearly through the haze of their own hurt and anger. Their perspective was skewed by their own emotions, unable to comprehend the other side. They were trapped in a cycle of accusation and defense, each one blaming the other for the downfall of their relationship, unable to see their own role in the destruction of what they once had. The night began to unravel quickly, the carefully constructed facade of the gala crumbling around them. Guests began to notice the tension, their heads turning, their whispers rippling through the crowd, their eyes following Sophia and Ethan as they engaged in their silent battle. Ethan's temper flared further when he noticed Adrian watching them from across the room, his expression unreadable, a mix of concern and guilt, perhaps even a hint of amusement. The culmination of months of frustration, resentment, and unmet expectations exploded in that moment, each emotion like a volatile fuel, feeding the flames of their argument. What began as a celebration of success, a grand spectacle of glamour and opulence, ended in chaos and turmoil. Security intervened as the confrontation grew more heated, their presence a stark reminder of the public nature of their breakdown. They escorted Ethan and Sophia outside, the crisp night air doing little to cool their tempers, their arguments echoing across the steps of the Grand Riviera, their voices a mix of anger, hurt, and despair. The once promising evening had turned into a nightmare, a public display of their failing relationship. The glamorous facade they had carefully constructed had shattered, revealing the raw and painful reality beneath the surface. By the time the car arrived to take them home, silence had replaced the shouting, the weight of their unresolved issues settling heavily between them, a tangible presence in the car, an unspoken acknowledgement of the deep chasm that separated their hearts. The drive home was agonizing, each mile seeming to stretch on forever, their hearts filled with pain and regret. Back at their apartment, the fight reignited, this time behind closed doors, their voices echoing through the empty rooms, their anger fueled by the frustration of their failed evening, the humiliation of the public scene, and the weight of their unspoken pain. Ethan's accusations grew sharper, his words more cutting, while Sophia's defenses turned into fierce counterattacks, her own anger matching his, as she lashed out in self-preservation. She refused to be the victim. She refused to let him win. Their argument echoed with the pain of unspoken grievances, their words cutting deeper than any physical wound, each phrase laced with venom and resentment. The cracks in their marriage, long ignored, long denied, were now impossible to deny, wider and deeper than they had imagined, like fissures in a fragile foundation. The storm raged, tearing through their shared life, tearing apart the very fabric of their relationship, a hurricane of emotions destroying everything in its path. When the storm finally subsided, they were left staring at the wreckage of their relationship, their hearts filled with a mixture of exhaustion, despair, and fear, uncertain of how to rebuild, or if they even wanted to. In the days that followed, Sophia grappled with the aftermath, her mind racing with a mix of regret, guilt, and a growing sense of confusion. The interactions with Adrian had been innocent, at least in her mind, but she couldn't deny the spark, the connection that had ignited between them. It had been a temporary escape, a moment of reprieve from her unhappy marriage, but it had also exposed a deeper dissatisfaction she could no longer ignore. She felt like she was standing at a precipice, a dark chasm yawning before her. She began to reflect on her marriage, on the moments that had led them to this breaking point. She replayed their memories, searching for signs, searching for answers. She wondered if she had truly been fair to Ethan, if she had communicated her needs, or if she had simply given up, resigned herself to a life of quiet desperation. She also wondered if Ethan had been fair to her, if he had truly loved her, or if she had just been a part of his carefully constructed life. Ethan, too, was forced to confront his role in their unraveling. He couldn't deny the hurt he felt, the anger that consumed him, but beneath the surface, a subtle sense of guilt was beginning to take root. He realized that his distance, his coldness, his lack of communication had pushed Sophia away, had made her feel isolated and unloved, even if her actions at the gala had felt like a betrayal. He had built a wall around his heart, a wall that had pushed away the person he once loved. He saw his own resentment reflected in her. He saw how he had become the very thing he hated. Yet, the question remained, could they bridge the gap between them? Could they forgive each other? Could they heal the wounds they had inflicted? Or had the damage gone too far? Had they crossed a line from which there was no return? The uncertainty hung over them, a dark cloud that overshadowed their every thought and action. The resolution of their story was not swift or easy. It was a long and arduous journey, one that required painful introspection, a willingness to face their own flaws, and a courageous commitment to healing. They decided to seek therapy, to work through their issues with the guidance of a professional, to learn how to communicate, to listen, to empathize with each other. It was a difficult process, filled with tears, anger, and a painful recognition of their individual mistakes. They had to dismantle the walls they had built, layer by layer, and expose their deepest fears and vulnerabilities. In time, they found a way to rebuild, not as the people they once were, not as the idealistic couple of their youth, but as the people they had become through the fire of their struggles, through their painful journey of self-discovery. They learned to communicate, not with anger or accusation, but with honesty and vulnerability. They learned to listen, not to defend or dismiss, but to understand and empathize. They learned to value the partnership they had once taken for granted, to appreciate each other's strengths and accept each other's flaws. For Sophia, the experience was a stark reminder of the importance of self-awareness, of having clear boundaries, and of communicating her needs effectively. She realized that she couldn't rely on others to fill the void within her, that she had to take responsibility for her own happiness and well-being. She had to love herself before she could truly love another. For Ethan, it was a lesson in vulnerability, in the courage to confront his own fears, in the need to open his heart, to share his emotions, and to be present in the moment. He learned that his strength didn't come from shutting down and isolating himself, but from connecting with others, from being honest and open about his struggles. He learned that his love for Sophia wasn't just about providing for her, but about understanding her, supporting her, and valuing her as an individual. Together, they emerged from the ashes of their failed marriage, stronger, more resilient, and more committed to each other, though not without scars, each mark a reminder of the pain they had endured and the lessons they had learned. They had faced their demons, they had survived the storm, and they were now ready to embrace the future with hope and with a renewed sense of purpose. Years later, Sophia looked back on that night at the Grand Riviera with a mix of regret and gratitude, the memory of the evening a complex tapestry of emotions, a reminder of a painful past, but also a celebration of their hard-won future. It had been the beginning of their lowest point, the moment when their relationship had come crashing down around them, but it had also been the catalyst for their transformation, the catalyst for the growth they had both experienced. She had learned that love was not a passive emotion, not a feeling that just happened, but an active choice, a conscious commitment that required effort, patience, and humility. It was not about always being happy, but about being willing to work through the tough times, to forgive each other's mistakes, and to support each other unconditionally. As she watched Ethan playing with their young daughter in the backyard of their new home, a beautiful sanctuary they had created together, she felt a quiet sense of peace wash over her, a sense of fulfillment and gratitude. Their journey had been tumultuous, filled with pain and uncertainty, but it had brought them here, to a place of deep connection, mutual respect, and unconditional love. They were not the same people they had been that night at the Grand Riviera. They had grown, they had changed, they had learned from their mistakes, and they had emerged, finally, as a couple who were truly committed to each other. And even now, with all the perspective she had gained, the wisdom she had acquired, she couldn't help but wonder, every now and then, what would have happened if she had just danced with her husband that night.